The relief and the tears on their faces told something of what they had been through and their happiness at being home. The first plane load of British nationals to make it back from war-ravaged Sudan touched down at Stansted Airport in Essex and into the welcoming embraces of relatives and friends. Getting them from Cyprus to the UK is not, of course, the hard bit. That's evacuating people from Sudan itself. So far, 536 out of a possible 4,000 have been picked up. There is now a race to fly in and get many more with just 1 day of the 3-day ceasefire left. Military chiefs have, however, told the Prime Minister they can evacuate another 500 people each day for as long as they need to.
Not just the end of 2 long flights, the end of an ordeal lasting for some almost 2 weeks. The first charter flight bringing British evacuees from Sudan, touching down at Stansted, whether they could have been brought home quicker, no longer an issue after what they'd lived through.
And the house is just shaking, and we sleep on the floor, and we can't stand near the windows, and we can't open the door freely like anytime, and anytime something can happen.
I think it was a big relief. It was a big relief, yeah. Yeah, we heard the news that the evacuation started, so we just went, and it was a couple of hours before we were told that we were getting to the flight, and it went very smooth.
The route to Stansted and safety passes through Larnaca Airport in Cyprus. The air bridge bringing more evacuees by military transport this afternoon. 79 on this flight, one of 6 so far. As they wait for onward transit by charter to the UK, some told us of the perilous journey even to get to the evacuation point.
Through looting zones, through dangerous terrains, just to get to the military base, which was a big risk to take my family on. And making that risk was a big decision because it can go either way, you know. Either you make it or you don't make it. There's no in between.
Going through the dark, we had slight chance of getting hit. There was a bullet that wheezed right next to me in the streets before I went through.
If all 6 of the rescue flights do make it out today, that could be as many as 1,000 people evacuated. That is still only a quarter of the number who may need help. And with 2 days of a fragile 3-day ceasefire already gone. As the C-130 transport plane headed back to RAF Akrotiri to prepare for another long journey south, the brigadier running the Sudan evacuation defended both the speed and the timing of his operation.
In the very early stages of fighting, where it's very complicated, intense, and we don't know what is happening, in particular we don't know who might be in control of things that are a threat to an aircraft, that in my professional military judgment is not the right time to be asking lots of people to move. In my judgment, this is the right time, and I support fully the Prime Minister's decision to call this evacuation now.
Through tonight and tomorrow, under the watchful eye of the Royal Marines, the air bridge from Khartoum will continue. But it is the last day of the fragile ceasefire, and if everyone doesn't get out, there will be questions about the judgments made by British officials. James Mace, News at 10, Cyprus.
Well, for those still in Sudan, ceasefire or no ceasefire, it remains, of course, a terrifying place. At least 459 people, including civilians and fighters, have been killed and over 4,000 wounded since fighting began last week. So no wonder there are large crowds of foreigners and Sudanese who've made it all the way to Port Sudan, waiting to be ferried to safety. Crowds of families have also been growing at Sudan's crossing with Egypt, while at least 20,000 refugees have fled across the border into Chad and nearly 4,000 into South Sudan, with others reported to have arrived already in the Central African Republic and Ethiopia.
Sudan's ceasefire has only 24 hours left, and so far it's meant that the streets of Khartoum have been largely empty and quiet. And yet that peace remains fragile, with plumes of smoke still rising above the city. And most people are still too frightened to venture out. Those that do lament at how their city has been left in ruin.
تعبنا. أن إحنا ما حنطلع من بيوتنا.
We're fed up. We're too afraid to go out, this woman said. We're going to die in our homes. And cursing the leaders of the warring factions, she said, the whole of Sudan is praying against you. Coenda Al-Sir said that whilst the ceasefire is the time to go out, there were no services. This is the third such truce, he said, but people aren't assured. This morning there was gunfire and the sound of other weapons. Whether the ceasefire holds or not, people of all nationalities are already trying to get on board anything to escape. And this is what Britons will face if they can't get on one of the RAF planes. One such route is Port Sudan. This boat, sent by Saudi Arabia, was taking people to Jeddah. The French battleship Lorraine docked too, taking UN personnel. And it's not just ships that headed to Port Sudan. An Indian Air Force plane landed to take citizens back home. The other main route is to the Egyptian border, a road journey that could take up to 3 days. And even when you reach it, there is already a 3-day backlog to process people. For many European countries, its mission almost accomplished. For Britain, it remains a race against time.
Most Western powers operating out of Djibouti are winding down their operations because they've got their nationals out. For Britain to catch up, they need to have the ceasefire hold in Sudan. Otherwise, British citizens will have to find their own way out, and that means heading to the border.
There are two parts to this tragic story. One is the frantic Western efforts to airlift their citizens to safety. The other are the millions of Sudanese for whom escape is not a possibility and who face a future dominated by the prospects of more war.
And Raghi joins us now. Raghi, when we heard from you last night, there were concerns, of course, over this ceasefire, but with pressure mounting, not least on that British operation, what hope of this ceasefire staying in place as long as it's supposed to, and any potential of it even outlasting the 72 hours?
Well, on the first point, Julie, I think it's very, very dicey. We're hearing from those eyewitnesses in my report that even though the truce holds, there has been sporadic gunfire and plumes of smoke within Khartoum city. But in terms of extending it, that is a possibility. I would be very, very surprised if within Washington and particularly in London, there weren't diplomatic moves to pressure both sides to extend the ceasefire. I think also on the other side of the warring factions, it is bizarrely in their interest for the Westerners to leave because they don't want any external eyewitnesses to what is happening within Sudan. And I'm sad to say that the momentum within the political dynamics of Sudan is that this conflict will continue. I don't think you're dealing with two parties which are in any way beholden to any international sort of norms of war, and Sudan has been descending into this for quite a while.
It's a chilling thought, Raghi. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you.